Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. So in this video I'm going to be going over a question I got from a trader regarding the relationship between Wyckoff and market structure. The question was, how relevant is Wyckoff to market structure? How often does it play out, and does it bear any relevance at all? And the answer is yes, it bears a lot of relevance, right? There's Wyckoff everywhere you look, okay? So, and it forms the majority of the market structure in the markets, right, whether you sort of realise it or not. So I'm sure that most of you have heard the saying or heard the phrase that the forex market or the financial market's a fractal. And basically what that means is you'll have bigger moves inside smaller moves, inside smaller moves, inside smaller moves, right? So if you think on a 1 minute time frame, okay, you'll have a move like this, right, and you'll see a push down, and then you'll see a move like this and it'll push up, and then you'll get a move like this and it'll push down, and a move like this and it'll push up, right? Okay. And a move like this, and it'll push up. Okay. And basically what's happening here is, if you look, right, on a 1 minute time frame, okay, if you was to zoom into this big move, so like this overall move that happened, let's say like this is on an hourly time frame, right? So this move happens on a 1 hour time frame. We get a push up, right? So we're in an uptrend, right? We push up, we get a preliminary supply, okay, or preliminary support, depending on which way round we look at it. We see a push down. We see our buying climax and an automatic rally, right? These are all phases of Wyckoff, okay? So this will be our UTAD, okay, or our up thrust, or our UTAD, either one. So basically, depending on how the schematic plays out, right? So it's either going to be our UTAD, so our up thrust after distribution, right, or just an up thrust, okay? This would be just an up thrust, okay, because we get no distribution. We see a little bit through here, but not much, right? We then see a sign of weakness, right? So a break of this break of structure to the downside, and then we'll see a push up, and then we'll get our spring or our test, right? Either our spring or our test, right? Just retesting the supply at this level, and then we'll see a sharp push down. So if this whole move plays out on the hourly time frame, and we was to move down to the lower time frames, right, to the 15 minute, 5 minute, 1 minute, we'd see that the exact same types of moves happen inside of that larger schematic, right? So we'd have some distribution, we'd then see a mark down, we'd then see some accumulation, and then we'd see a mark up, right? We'd see a mark down, some accumulation, maybe some reaccumulation, before we see a push up into some more distribution, right? And basically the same move that happened on the larger time frame plays out time and time again on the lower time frames, right? So if we just take a look at the live charts, and I'll show you exactly what I mean, okay? So all right, so this is a monthly chart, and if I just bring up, for those of you who are unaware, let me just bring up the Wyckoff schematic, okay? So Richard Wyckoff, right? Let's just go to the schematic. So basically what you'll notice is that the Wyckoff price cycle has three main components to it, right? So you have your accumulation area, okay, where the demand is greater than supply. You'll see the accumulation, right? Big banks accumulating their buy orders, getting ready to take the market long, okay, basically faking out traders, testing supply in the market. When the demand becomes greater than the supply in the market, we'll see a mark up, right? When the market is marked up enough and the traders want to take their profits, okay, you'll see an area of distribution. And basically what that is just the institutions, the big banks, slowly distributing out of their positions, right? But again, just faking traders out, making traders think that the market's going to continue higher, they'll sell out. And they'll just basically fake traders out of the market through accumulation, distribution, schematics, right? And then once the supply is greater than the demand, the market will then mark down, okay? And this will repeat time after time until we get the larger schematics on the larger time frames, right? And they will play out, okay? So if we just have a look here, right? So these schematics here, these are the areas of accumulation and distribution, right? So basically you get a preliminary support, you'll then get a small push up. Obviously we all notice these trending moves, right? We'll then see a selling climax, an automatic rally, an ST, the ST in B, which is basically making traders think that the market's going to continue lower, thinking it's just a pullback. Okay, they'll then accumulate some positions, right? We'll then get a push lower, which again introduces more traders into the market thinking, right, this is definitely going to push lower. We'll then see a push higher, potentially even sometimes this push higher breaks the top resistance lines before coming back down into this order block, which is what we call our test, right? Or which Wyckoff calls the test, into this order block, and then we'll see our mark up, right? But this schematic plays out time and time again. So again, look, this is the monthly chart. Okay, so if we just start on the monthly, okay, you can see that, look, we see a push higher. If we just go back here, we see our push higher, and again, right, push higher. We'll see some distribution, right, tapping into this order block. We'll then see a push lower. Okay, we'll then see some sort of accumulation and a push higher. And if we was to drop down to a lower time frame, no doubt we'll see some sort of distribution, right, before a push lower. Okay, bearing in mind this is the monthly chart, right, and I'll get into how it affects market structure later on. So again, we see a push lower, and then we see our push higher. This is also a good area to get involved. This is known as our last point of support. Okay, so if we come over here, you can see, where was it? If we come over to here, you can see that this is our last point of support, right? So we get a spring, a push up that breaks the resistance line. So we then get some reaccumulation, okay, at that level, and then we push higher, okay, just like what we've seen there. Okay, we then see some reaccumulation, right? Again, this would be some Wyckoff at this level if we was to drop down, which I'm going to show you on a lower time frame. And again, if we was to drop down on a lower time frame, this move would literally just look like this, right? So we'd see a push down, and then we'd see some sort of accumulation before we start to mark up, right? And again, it just happens time after time after time. Again here, that would literally just look like this move here. Okay, this would literally just look like this, right? A UTAD, okay, maybe a test, and then market traveling lower, okay? Exactly the same here, right? We see a push down, buying climax, right? Creating some equal lows, okay? An ST and B, right? Before we see a push down into this order block, right? And then this is our spring higher, anticipating higher prices, right? So if we just take a look down at a few levels, right, and just see what happens at these different levels. Okay, so if we take a look there, right, we'll take a look there. Okay, we'll take a look there. At all of these swing points, what happens at all of these swing points, right? Obviously, we've got to be a little bit careful about how far we can go back here. So if we just go back to this, in fact, let's go back to there. Okay, so if we go down to the daily, alright, so this is what I mean by the markets are fractal, right? So we was just on the monthly time frame, okay, and we dropped down to a move that looks like this, right? A move that looks like this on the monthly, down onto the daily, okay? So now that we're down on the daily, right, we're expecting to see a move. We can see that we've seen our preliminary support, right? Our ST, we then are looking for our automatic rally, potentially an ST and B, a spring, right, before potential moves higher. So the schematic may not look exactly like that time after time, but you just got to train your eyes to notice what's happened where, what parts of the schematics played out, you know, identifying the manipulation and when you're likely to see them pushes higher off than springs, okay? So if we just move this market forward, right? It'd actually look like this, okay? So this would actually be our schematic, okay? So we had our preliminary support, our ST, right? Our push higher, our ST and B, which this move here pushed down below these lows, liquidating these lows, right? And then this move higher was our sign of weakness, right? Or a sign of strength rather. And again, this move here tapped into our order block. So again, if we was to then drop down into this move, okay, even any of these moves, whether we look here, 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 right, or here, we're gonna see signs of Wyckoff accumulation everywhere. Okay, so you basically get the big schematic, and inside of that big schematic you get smaller schematics and smaller schematics. Do you know what I mean? Like it goes down lower and lower. So basically all of these swing points on the larger schematic, we're going to see, if we drop down to a lower time frame, we're going to see smaller schematics and smaller schematics and smaller schematics, right? That was our test, okay, and then we see them higher prices, okay, off of our test, right? So let's just take a look over here, right? So again, we see the market moving higher, right? We get our buying climax, right, or a buying climax there, okay, generating equal highs. We then liquidate that for our UTAD, okay. We again break lows, okay, so sign of weakness to the downside. We get our last push higher, right, giving us an order block which liquidates these lows, okay. So this would be our UTAD. We then break more lows to the downside, showing that we're seeing a sign of weakness, okay. Push up into this order block, right. Again, we'd most likely see this move here would give us some sort of Wyckoff-ian accumulation, right, or distribution rather, sending us into lower prices. Exactly the same here. If we was to take a look at this move, right, we'd literally just see a move down, preliminary selling climax, preliminary support, right, our automatic rally, okay, there, our ST, push higher, our spring before we get higher prices, right? So everywhere you look, you get Wyckoff accumulation distribution, right? It's just the markets are fractal, okay? So they move, so you get a bigger schematic and then a smaller schematic and a smaller schematic and a smaller schematic, right? But it basically makes up pretty much, you know, 99% of the market structure. So hopefully this will change the way that you look at the markets, right? From a market that seemingly looks very random and sort of unpredictable, you can actually start to build out a lot of reasoning behind a lot of the moves, right? And sort of when and where they're likely to occur. Okay, so again, if we just pull this back and we drop down to somewhere like this, right? Let's just remove that and we'll take a closer look at what actually happens inside this order block, right? So our order block starts there, okay, and if we drop down, we've got to be careful about how low we drop, but if we just drop down to the 4 hour, right, we're actually start to see what happens inside of this higher time frame order block, okay. So you can see, look, as we drop down again, you can start to see the schematic play out further, right? So we get a push down, okay, our ST, we get some reaccumulation, breaks of structure, a push down, okay. That would be our order block through there, right? We then get a spring off of this level and then we start to see higher prices. And then what do we do, right? We get a buying climax, generating equal highs, right? We then get a UTAD after distribution, which then gives us an order block, right? We push down, we get a break of structure, okay? Push down into this order block before we then see lower prices, Okay, so again, we've had a bigger schematic, and inside of that we get smaller schematics. Now we're pushing down into this order block on the higher time frame, right? What do we get? Let's see what happens inside of this order block, right? So we're pushing down. In fact, if we just bring on the volume indicator, right? Okay, so we've gone overbought on the RSI as well, right? So this is likely going to start nearing the end of our trend, okay, as we're approaching this order block. The volumes started to pick up, right? So look, you can see we had low volume, bang, as we hit that order block, the volume spikes, right? Low volume down into the order block, bang, the volume spikes. So I'd say that is our preliminary support. Obviously, until the whole schematic plays out, or most of the schematic plays out, you don't know like what this is, okay? We can only assume that this is our preliminary support, okay? Our selling climax there. Okay, our automatic rally, right? And again, we'd most likely have the, going to have the schematics playing out there. In fact, I can see the schematics playing out at these swing points just on a lower time frame. So if we was to drop down onto a lower time frame, we'd see the schematics play out there as well, right? But obviously, I don't want to go down too low because I'm on the replay mode. Okay, so we can see that we've got some equal lows being generated, right? So this may now actually be our selling climax, looking for a liquidation of that level before we see a push higher, a tap into this order block, and then some higher prices, right? Again, you can see that we've had a break of structure, again, liquidating some highs, right? Oh, so we didn't actually get a liquidation of that level, okay? Because if you see, this was our liquidation, okay? So by the looks of it, in hindsight, this was our liquidation, okay? That was our order block. So let's just delete some of this. Okay, so they was our equal lows. That was our run of liquidity, giving us an order block through there, right? Push down into that. Again, if we was to drop lower, I don't think we can drop lower. Let's just see if we can continue dropping lower, because you'll start seeing this pattern as you drop lower and lower and lower and lower. You'll see the pattern repeat time after time after time, right? So it's just fractal, okay? That's what it means by the market being fractal. The same patterns just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, okay? So that is our order block, right? Let's just draw that on neatly. If we can drop down to, I don't know, let's say a 2 hour time frame. Yeah, we can drop down to a 2 hour. Again, look, we've got a preliminary support. Okay, a selling climax, right? Our automatic rally, which then breaks structure. Okay, so you can see our automatic rally, breaks structure, taking liquidity from both sides, right? Then get a push down into that order block, okay? And again, if we was to drop down onto a lower time frame into here, again, we're just going to see exactly the same thing, right? So a move like that, breaks of structure, and then a push higher, okay? One of our schematics. Obviously, we'll either see a move like that where we get no ST and B, or we'll see a move like this where we get our preliminary support, selling climax, automatic rally, right, our ST and B, and then a test of our ST and B before we see higher prices. So we're going to see one of them two schematics generally. Again, like I said, the schematic doesn't play out perfectly time after time, right? But the basic fundamentals of what happens inside of each schematic will be the same. Obviously, they're going to differentiate enough to sort of throw you off, right? Obviously, it's not going to be perfect time after time. Obviously, there's different fundamental events that affect the markets as well, right? So there's going to be different factors that are obviously going to come into play as well. But all right, so how could we look to take this as a trade? Okay, so you can look to enter off of your order block, right? And if we look to, even if we just look to these highs, right? Or the most recent highs, okay? Obviously you can see that you're getting a nice risk reward trade, and then with the understanding that the market's fractal, right, as we're approaching this order block, you can then drop down to an even lower time frame, like a 15 or a 5-minute time frame, to then get an even more refined entry, and then have potentially your entry looking something like this, right? So instead of off of this larger Wyckoff accumulation schematic, you can then drop down into the 15 or the 5 on like a 2-hour or a 1-hour order block, then look for the schematic and really refine your entries, right? Potentially then just looking for target ones at the top of the higher time frame resistance lines on the schematic, and then looking for secondary targets at them higher time frame highs, right? And of course you can then so again, what have we got here? Seen a push up, right? This could either be some reaccumulation or Wyckoff distribution, okay? Looking for lower prices, potentially to take out these lows, okay? So what have we got? Selling climax, okay, UTAD. So an up thrust, sign of weakness, right? UTAD giving us our order block. Seen another sign of weakness, a pushback into that order block, so potentially dropping down into a lower time frame for your lower time frame accumulation schematic, right? Giving you an entry in there to potentially take prices lower, right? Again, I don't know what happens here, and that was over the weekend, and then we see the lower prices, right? So again, exactly the same thing. Obviously, it's not going to play out time after time. I didn't do any sort of other analysis there either. So we get a preliminary support, right? Our up thrust after the distribution, giving us our order block. We then see a sign of weakness, okay, breaking lows, a pushback into that order block before we see our lower prices, right? And exactly the same thing, okay? We've got some imbalance there, right? So if you haven't seen my video on imbalance, go and check that out. Got some imbalance through there, which we've then filled. We've liquidated these lows, and we're starting to see some manipulation at this level. So this could either be some reaccumulation, looking to take prices lower into a lower order block before higher prices, or we're seeing the accumulation now, okay? So we've had a push down, right, generating equal lows. We've had a push down into them equal lows. So we'd like to see a move higher, breaking structure, a retest of this order block before we start to see higher prices, right? So if we just delete that, delete that, delete that. Just see how this plays out. Right, okay, so not what we haven't actually seen that yet. So again, still waiting. We'd like to see a breaker structure, a push down into now this order block. So if I just get rid of this. So we'd like to see a breaker structure, okay, a push down into this order block, right, that took out these lows, and then a move higher, okay. So again, our schematics just playing out time and time again, okay, just on lower time frames. And if we was to drop down again to a lower time frame, which I'll show you in a minute, we'd get that. So again, we see a breaker structure, we get a push down into that order block. It doesn't quite give us the entry we'd like. We may have been stopped out of that. So that may have just been some reaccumulation, right? Looking for our schematic again. Again, it depends. You don't just want to look for this everywhere. You obviously just want to look for this schematic at higher time frame areas of interest, right? So again, at your higher time frame order blocks, okay? And at your supply and demand zone. So obviously we've got a demand zone coming up here, right? So that just may have just been some reaccumulation, faking some traders into long positions, okay? Again, banks buying their orders all the way through there, right? We're now at our higher time frame demand level, okay? So previously the supply outweighed the demand and we saw higher prices from here, so we may expect to see a similar thing again. We've already seen our preliminary support, okay? Our push down to our selling climax, right? Automatic rally, our break of structure. So now that is our order block. We'd like to see a test of that order block before potential higher prices again playing out our schematic, right? So I push down into that order block, we see some higher prices, okay? And then bang, right? And if we was to again, broken record, look at this move, this would literally just play out our schematic again, okay? Right, down into this move, which is going to just play out our schematic again, okay? So I hope that that makes sense. Obviously, sort of got a little bit sidetracked on that video. I wanted to go into more about sort of market structure, but I'll do that on the next video. So I'll go into how Wyckoff sort of affects market structure and all the rest of it, right? But I hope this sort of answers the question about price being fractal, how and where to look for Wyckoff accumulation and distribution, and the fact that it sort of happens pretty much everywhere, right? Most moves in the market are, even though they look random, are formed intentionally, right? But really sort of understanding these concepts is going to make is going to sort of allow you to make a lot more sense out of the market and, you know, sort of the moves that happen in the market, okay? Taking them from seemingly random to being like, oh, okay, that's why that happened, that's why that happened. Okay, now I can look here in future as a potential place of interest because there was a lot of demand at this level before, which we liquidated these lows, we saw a push higher and we haven't come back to mitigate this level. Okay, so now next time I look at this demand zone, right, or the supply zone, whichever way you're looking at it, you know to look at that as an area of interest or an area of potential interest. Okay, so I hope you got value from the video. If you did, be sure to drop us a like and subscribe to the channel, and wherever you are on your trading journey, I hope you have a good week and I'll see you on the next one.